Good morning. On behalf of Little River United Church of Christ, I welcome you to this space. My name is Shelley Poe, and I'm the senior minister here at Little River. Before we begin our program this morning, I want to share with you a little bit about the history of this place where you are currently sitting and the grounds that you are invited to explore while you're here. This land was once traversed by the Piscataway, the Manahoac, the Dueg peoples. They farmed, hunted, and fished on the same land that now surrounds us. They honored the same trees that tower over us in the parking lot. They walked on the same contours of the land that we now enjoy. Beloved, this is hallowed ground. After the displacement of the Piscataway, the Manahoac, and the Dueg people in the late 17th century, European settlers dwelt here. The land on which we sit was once owned by one of the largest slave-holding families in Fairfax County prior to and at the time of the Civil War. William Gooding owned land north and south of the Little River Turnpike and operated a famous tavern that was near where the Gooding family cemetery now sits, whose brick enclosure you can see from our driveway. Census records show that William Gooding enslaved 29 people, from 60 years old to less than 1 year old in 1850. His son, Peter Gooding, who ran the tavern with his father, enslaved 21 people in 1850, ranging in age from 44 years to 1 year old. Another son, William H. Gooding, enslaved 22 people in 1850. Altogether, this father and two sons enslaved 72 people in 1850 here on this land. The people enslaved by William H. Gooding are those likely to have been buried north of the Gooding family cemetery on the west side of our driveway. Over the decades, Little River congregants have also found grave markers here and there, even in our own backyard, though we don't know their original locations. And on All Saints' Day each year, we say the names of those enslaved people whose names are recorded for us. Beloved, this is hallowed ground. In 1955, 70 years ago this year, this community was founded by Congregationalists who were committed to establishing a church in Northern Virginia where Black and white people could worship together during the Jim Crow era. In 1954, Old Virginia was still in existence, totally segregated by race in schools, restaurants, drinking fountains, public facilities, and society in general. Although Brown versus Board of Education had ruled that segregation in public schools was unconstitutional, Virginia was the leader of the massive resistance in the southern states. In this context, 20 young people decided to establish a new congregational church that would teach a faith that is congruent with reason and take action for racial justice. In the 1980s, after Ann Holmes was ordained as the first openly lesbian clergy person in the UCC, she and her partner Linda made Little River their home for many decades. In 2001, Little River officially became open and affirming. Beloved, this is hallowed ground, and we are committed to continuing our legacy of resisting injustice. If you are looking for a spiritual home, we invite you to join us in that task as we spread the love of God here in Northern Virginia. I've also been asked to announce that we will be using the Red Chalice hymnal that is in a chair in front of you. We'll be singing 2 hymns during our program. Friends, welcome to Little River, and blessings on our learning and our conversations.
My name is Drew Nettinga, and I'm a member of the Racial Justice Committee, a Racial Justice Ministry team here at Little River, and we welcome you. We're so delighted to see you here this morning for this very important and educational and I think intriguing program. The plan for the morning is we will be here first in the sanctuary to listen to Dr. Scott lead us in a conversation about banned books. Then we'll have a break. There's some coffee and cookies and other things to nourish us. And then after that, we'll come back here to the sanctuary and we'll have a conversation about the very intriguing and wonderful book, All Boys Aren't Blue. So again, thank you for being here this morning. We're going to begin with presentation by Dr. Dorri C. Scott. She is a tireless advocate for ending book bans. She's a podcaster and leads banned book campaigns. She was an advisor on the film Banned Together, and this morning she'll be leading us in a conversation about banned books. Dr. Scott is a graduate of the OPM Executive Education Program at Harvard Business School, holds a master's in social work and a doctorate in education leadership organization innovation. Her BA degree was in political science, and she has earned certifications in health and wellness and family mediation. Committed to building diverse and equitable spaces, a transformational leader, speaker, coach, from classroom to boardroom, Dr. Dorri writes and shares and supports doing good servant leadership and kindness above all to make the world better. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Dorri Scott.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Can you hear me okay? We who believe in freedom cannot rest. Can you say it with me? We who believe in freedom cannot rest. One more time. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. I'm so grateful to be here, and I thank everyone for inviting me. I particularly thank Karen, who was very kind. She'd send me these wonderful emails, and she'd want to talk, and I'm thinking, well, I don't have time to talk. I'm writing, I'm reading, I'm speaking. But I'm thankful so much that you invited me to be part of this. He told you a little bit about me, and I want to tell you beyond the ban is what we're going to talk about just a little bit today. I brought a few notes, but I'd like to pass these out and give everyone a card. And I'm just going to ask you if you would just take one for yourself. Make sure your neighbor has one. Remember, sharing is caring. Remember that? Sharing is caring. There you go. And I have enough. And as I'm talking, I want you to just write on a piece of paper, tell me a book that you read, that you loved, and just write it down and just share that, because I'm collecting data still. And some of the data that I'm collecting, I want to look at what books people are reading, and we're going to look at those 10,000 books that are continuing to be banned. So you don't have to do it right now, but as you hear me talk, I'd like to ask you to please do that if you would. They came for the Jewish, but I was not Jewish, so I did not stand. They came for the Muslims, but I'm not a Muslim, so I did not stand. They came for the Catholics, but I'm not Catholic, so I did not stand. And then they came for me. And you know what happened. There was no one left to stand. That's what's happening with books. We need each of you to stand for the books that we're looking at are banned. So I want you to look to your left and ask them, are you willing to stand? Then I'm going to ask you to stand with me if you can. And if you cannot stand, it's okay. Would you stand, please? And I'm just going to throw out some books, and I'm going to name some names to you. If you read Anne Frank, would you please take a seat? If you read Beloved, please take a seat. If you read 1984, please take a seat. Oh, my goodness, who's left to stand? This is what's happening. This is why we must stand. Together, we must stand. My parents were born in the segregated South. My mother is 96 years old, and I'm grateful to tell you she is still living feisty, lives on her own, and still thinks she needs to run my life. Go figure. Okay. That being said, they left because they wanted to give my sister and I a better life. And a better life they wanted to give us was come from Jim Crow in Georgia, back before I was born. And they moved into a Jewish neighborhood, and they were only able to move there because the NAACP, B'nai B'rith, a Jewish community, and the councilman in the community said, we will help this family move. So my sister and I were the only two children that lived in the schools that I grew up in, probably 4th grade through 12th grade. What did that do to change my life? It gave me a sense of empathy. It gave me a sense of understanding people who were not like me. But the most profound thing that I learned from my parents is the books that they put on the table. And the book that I grew up on the table was a book by a man named James Baldwin. Okay? And I looked at that book and thought, the fire next time. And my father would say, read it. My father couldn't read. My father didn't even graduate high school. But the impact that he put on me to understand the value of reading and understanding outside of myself was in a book. Now remember, I grew up in a Jewish neighborhood, so you know every little girl read Anne Frank. I thought, how am I going to learn about a community that's not like me? So I read Anne Frank, and I learned about the Jewish community. And then I went on to college, and I was influenced by one of the most powerful women that I can tell you that I love to this very day. She's no longer with us. Her name is Dr. Gloria Harper Dickinson. She was one of my mentors. And she taught me about Black women's literature, and she introduced me to Bluest Eye. And Bluest Eye helped me understand myself. It helped me understand a little bit about a little Black girl who had blue eyes who just didn't feel like she fit. Remember, I grew up in a Jewish neighborhood. I wanted a bat mitzvah. My parents weren't having it. Now, you going to a Black Baptist church, girl. And I grew up there. But my point is that the book helped me identify, figure out, see myself in a way I had never seen myself, the Bluest Eye. So as life went on, I had the opportunity to get lots of education. They talked to you about it. What I did was, I said, I want to do my doctorate. And I wanted to look at why are all of the textbooks 10% fewer about women? Have you looked at that? Did you all know that? In our textbooks, of course, we know about the famous few women that were there, Susan B. Anthony, and I could go on, but fewer than 10% are about women. So I said, I'm going to look at women's literature, and I'm going to talk about Black women's literature. And then I found out Toni Morrison was banned. Wait. It's what? It's banned. And I said, maybe I should do my dissertation on Toni Morrison. One of the things I didn't tell you is that when I was in Kansas City, and I lived there for about 12 years, I had the distinct opportunity to meet Dr. Maya Angelou. And she came to visit there, and she needed to get a ride to the airport. Now, this is back in the time when you would take people to the airport, and they needed a ride. They didn't have limos. We didn't have Facebook and all of that. And she said, I just need a ride to the airport. I'll take you. I'll take you. She became a mentor. And what she said to me was, always own yourself, baby. Own yourself, baby. And I can just see her saying that to me now. Own yourself. So I looked and I thought, Maya Angelou is banned. Toni Morrison is banned. Anne Frank is banned. Judy Blume is banned. Oh, you know why she's banned? Because she talked about a girl having breasts. Imagine that. Can you imagine a little girl growing up getting breasts? Having a period? Oh my goodness, did I say the wrong words? They banned her book. And the little girl was trying to figure it out. But all those books are banned. She's also a Jersey girl. Did I tell you I'm from Jersey? But at any point, what the book said to me was, something is wrong. So I decided to do my dissertation on this and look at it more deeply. Now, let me just tell you, it was not easy. And why was it not easy? Because in education, people look at what happens on a probably classroom level, what happens perhaps in an environment that relates mostly with children in a combined area. But I'm a big thinker. I'm thinking way bigger than the classroom. I'm thinking, where are we without books? So I looked at beyond the band, and I did, that's the other thing, educators like fancy words. So I did a phenomenological study. You all know what that is right now. A phenomenological study is telling the story. It's about sharing stories. It's about people sharing their lives. I did a phenomenological study on the impact of banned books as it relates to college students. And the reason I did that is because I had the opportunity to be a consultant to a film that was called Band Together. And this shared 3 college students that were fighting against banned books. And what they were fighting against banned books is, one was fighting because someone said that she was in the classroom one day, and what they did was they took the little tray that runs around to bring lunch, and they said, put the book on the table. And one of the books they put on the table was a book that she was reading about a little girl and a little boy who were gay. And the school said, we can't read those because we don't have gay people in the world, and we're not going to talk about that. And another one said that she got involved in the community because her brother is trans. And he left the United States and went to Canada and now cannot come back because the student has changed the name. And she said, we're supporting our child, and we're not going to change our passport again to make certain people feel more comfortable. The young ladies that I worked with were phenomenal. They were part of my study. I kept the study very small. The search was 4 people, 2 African-American women, 2 white women, one of the women is queer. And I wanted them to share their stories about what the impact of banned books were for them and how they were living their lives. And what they did was they shared their story about how racism, how sexism, how homophobia is impacting lives as we look from classroom to the boardroom. These were college women that were advocates. So I picked 4 very strong theorists. I like to keep things kind of shaken up. So I'm going to tell you where I started. You're going to love this. Critical race theory. And I used critical race theory to understand the data because I wanted to look at systems. And I remember I went to Harvard, so I had an opportunity at one point to visit meet Professor Derek Bell, who's no longer living. But he's one of the founders of critical race theory. And what critical race theory is about is looking at how systems, when you aggregate that data, really begins to implicate and advocate or take away from how we see the world. So when I look at systems of housing, when I look at systems of schools, when I look at systems of groups of people, I can see patterns. And in those patterns, I can understand how racism is impacted. That's what critical race theory is all about. I also looked at bell hooks. I told you, I just went right there. Bell Hooks is one of the women that we know who does not capitalize her name. Bell Hooks, and the reason for that is she said, I never want my work to be about me. I want my work to be about what I do, and I want my students to see. And she talks about something called transformative work in the classroom. Let me go back. So I want you to understand that when you are a person of color, and we say things like, I'm fighting every single day. Here's an example of something that I had to fight that took me away from my research, but it took me into a place that I had to defend my work, defend the person, and then come back to be the student and remember, I need a degree. I wanted another degree. So I put up the work for Bell Hooks, and one of my professors said, you gotta capitalize her name. I said, no, she didn't capitalize her name. Well, you need to tell people that. You need to write that as a side note. My research is not about me helping you understand why she's doing this. My research is about bell hooks. Well, I don't understand it. Okay, you don't understand it. Then you need to do a little work. But that's that space of how systemic racism kind of gets in the way of doing the work that we're doing. Here I'm trying to get a degree. Here I'm trying to share the implication of banned books. And you don't understand bell books because you've not read anything about bell books, because you've never been empathetic enough to come outside of your own space to understand what it takes to be in this space. Long story short, my professor, who I love, and I give her a lot of credit to this day, Dr. Marcia Baldanza, she said, Dorri, I know you're a Jersey girl, and I know you want to make a point, but you want a degree. Give her what she wants, and then tell the story later. So I told the story. Thank you, Marcia Baldanza. But my point is that Bell Hooks was always about transformation in the classroom. And what she said is, if you see the student in the classroom, it's up to you to transform the classroom for the student, not for you. And you meet the student where she is. So that research helped me understand, okay, what do we do in the classroom? How do we use that research to help people transform classrooms? Well, if a student comes to the classroom, and that student might be trans and might not be able to get understood, or the student might be gay, or the student might be black, or the student might be an immigrant, you meet them where they are with information to help them better understand the world. So that's why I use bell hooks. And then I used a gentleman named Paulo Freire. Now, he was so heavy. I'm like, how did I end up with him? I go back to Dr. Marcia Valdanza. She said, oh, you need to talk about him. He's from South America, and he talks about how classrooms are molded into the classroom. So I used his research as well. And then I also use one of my favorite scholars, W.B. Du Bois. And W.B. Du Bois, as you know, is the first African American to graduate from Harvard University and to get his doctorate. And what he says is we live in two identities. He calls it social identities. We live in two spaces. So when you are a woman of color, when you are a female, when you stand in that space of being a female and a woman of color, you're constantly going back and forth. So when I think about my students who are reading and trying to understand who they are in that special space, I thought, who better than W.B. Du Bois? So I used that research to identify what is the problem. What is the problem? Well, the problem is, what are people afraid of? What are people trying to get away from? And how it that women groups like Moms for Liberty, you all hear about that group? I researched them a little bit in my group because one of the women in my research talked about Moms for Liberty and how they were mothers who were for liberty. I'll let y'all figure that one out. And another side story is they came to Washington, D.C. right about this time last year. My son is 34. And I said, Moms for Liberty is coming to town. He said, Mom, look, I know you're doing your research, and I know you want to change the world, but please don't go there because I need to go to work tonight, and I can't come to jail to pick you up. But I was curious about how they do the work that they do. So one of the women in my research, she said to me, what they do is they put this facade on about how they're about liberty for children and how they want everyone to feel the same way. And it's like, really? And how they whitewash religion to make people think that they really are for everyone. They're not. Now, the group is not as prevalent as it was 3 years ago when I did my research, but they're still out there. And I ran against them up in Winchester. I do a lot of speaking, and they happened to be in town one time when I was there. And I thought, should I go in the back room and just hear what they have to say? And I said, nah. My son already told me he can't come pick me up out of jail. So I just better go speak on banned books and keep doing what I'm doing. The research. The research comes together with questions, and we call them, they're questions that help me identify what it is I'm trying to figure out. What is the problem? The problem is when we have banned books, what does it do to people? How are they impacted? And how do we figure out how to help people overcome using the research and the data to sustain and to qualify and quantify it? The number one thing that came out of my research, when we read and we look at diverse books and we understand people who are not like us, we create empathy. If there's no other reason than that, doesn't that make the world better? Isn't it about humanity? And if I can learn to be empathetic to someone who doesn't look like me, who does not think like me, who doesn't see like me, but I can respect the human side, the empathy is what I'm looking for. What else happens? When I leave books into the library, I create a sense of community for people to understand in a way privately, people not like them, to read more. We're dumbing down a nation when we take books out. When we don't buy books and we don't use the books that we have that are available to us, we're dumbing down our nation. And the first thing those who are in totalitarianism, the first thing they want to do, they want to shut out books. They want to take out scholars like me. Because what I've done is I've got data and science and numbers and stories that document what happens when we read. So when we take that away from people, what are we doing? We're dumbing down a nation. The research was phenomenal. It's ongoing. What can we do? What can you do? I think you've got to keep buying books. And I think you've got to keep buying books because what will happen is if publishers don't see us buying the books, they're going to stop printing the books. And if the books are not printed, then who will read them? In order to make the message across, rather than talk just about banned books, I just talk about reading. We've got a literacy problem in our country. That's bigger than banned books. We've got a literacy problem. Our children are not reading. They're on the screen, I get that. So what can you do? Well, the first thing you can do is you can buy banned books, because I'm looking at people here who look about my age. We old. Some of us over 50, we old. And so we're going to read the books, but our children are not. Just make them mad and read to them. Read to them. Read to them, because if you read to them, they will become excited about reading other people's books. My son is now 34, and one of the things when he was a little boy, everybody could read. We were a reading family. And he thought, well, why can't I read? So he started reading the Washington Post sports page. It didn't matter. He was reading. What can you do with your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, your children, to get them involved in reading books? How can you help them do that? Well, when they get on social media, you can introduce them to other things other than TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. There are other things out there that you can introduce them to. And if you're needing some information about how to do that, contact me and I can help you with that. Because there are some funny things that they can read and do those kinds of ways to understand beyond who they are. We've created this society of it's all about me. Books help us understand it's not just about you. It's about what we do together collectively to make the world better. I was listening on my way here today to a gentleman that I listen to a lot. His name is, I know the book is called Inner Vision. I think that's Inner Excellence. I'm sorry, Inner Excellence. I listen to it almost every day. And someone said to me, Dorri, you're very busy. I stay in my head a lot because I'm thinking, my purpose is to serve. And when I get up in the morning, I'm thinking, now, why are you going to talk about banned books again? I'm tired. I'm purposed to serve. And so if you can find a way to serve your families as it relates to literacy and come away from the ugly word of banned books, because people don't want to talk about that. What about literacy? What about saving the books in our classroom to the boardroom so that we can have a society 100 years from now where we have a learned group of people? That's what this is all about. I'm going to take your questions, but I want you to think about it this way. There are over 10,000 books that are banned. Plus, 10,000 plus and growing. When I started my research, there were probably fewer than 1,500. Like I said, today, there are over 10,000 plus. There are two terms that you hear often. One is challenge books, and the other is banned books. A challenge book is a book that people question, so it may not be off the shelves, but they're thinking about whether or not they should take it off. A banned book is a book that's been taken out of the community. How is a book banned? One person can decide. When you want to look at who bans a book, your school boards are very important in your community. There was a time several years ago when you look at it, this movement that we're seeing that's happening, that's coming from the administration all the way down, where did they start? School boards. Because school boards are where your books are selected. They are the people that pick the books. They are the people that pay for the books. And they're the ones that design and make sure the curriculums that we're looking at in our classroom are pushed in the classroom. So one of the things you want to look at is looking at who's on your school board. How do you make a difference in your school board? And how do you get those books that might be banned in your classroom? Because it takes one person. So let's say that you don't like the book that I'm reading. You don't like Toni Morrison's book. She goes to her friend and says, we need to make sure this book is banned. And they go to the administration and they pull the book, or they can challenge the book. One person. That tells you how powerful this movement is and how quiet and subtle it is because it's happening in school boards. The other thing you want to look at as you're looking at banned books is why are books banned? Violence. What's violent? They consider a rape violence. It is a violent act. But when someone shares in a memoir that a book is banned, should that book be banned? One of my favorite books of all time is Dr. Maya Angelou. I told you I had the opportunity to meet her. She was phenomenal. And I just loved her cadence. I loved the way she spoke. I practice. My point is simply this. It's her story. She was raped. She did not speak for years. But can we learn from her not speaking for the years that she did from the memoir? Of course we can. It's the #1 banned book by the federal government agencies that are our academies. Naval Academy, Air Force Academy, West Point. #1 banned book. Okay. So violence, and that's what they consider violent. Of course, race. There are a large number of books that are related to race. Books that are related to women's thought. All right, women, you all know. You're thinking too much. You're trying to be too smart. You're trying to be fancy. Those books are banned. And I can go on and on. Religion, and of course, language. Those are the reasons that they will select to have a book banned. So you want to look at those lists and understand, all right, these are the reasons that they're selecting that these books are banned. But they impacted me. Did they hurt me? Did they help me? How can I help someone else? I want to also make sure I give you a little more information about, LGBTQA+ themes. They're banned. And I know you're going to read that book. The #1 most banned book, 1984, by George Orwell. And I also want to make sure I give you a little information about how you can make a difference. I'm going to start a podcast, and we're thinking about the name. We're focusing on it right now. I had the opportunity to speak about a week and a half ago at the National Association of Social Workers conference with Dr. Michael Eric Dyson. And what he has talked about is just how race is so embedded in this and how sexism is so embedded in this thinking that we're doing today. And what he said was we've got to really not just talk about it in a way that make people feel like they're afraid of it, but inviting people in, which helped me understand why talking about literacy becomes much more important than just talking about banned books. So if you can change your frame with me to talk a little bit more about literacy, I think that makes a difference. I think that helps people feel a little bit more comfortable, and then after you get them, go for it. One of the most banned books is The Wizard of Oz. Yeah, because it's got a witch, and that witch is ugly and she's dark, and we don't want our children to understand anything about dark and ugly. We don't have that in the world. I love the book, and I want to close with this, and then I'm going to open up with some questions. Dorothy simply wanted one thing. She wanted to go home. She wanted to find that space, that place that she felt comfortable. For me, it's books. For her, it was home. She lived in Kansas. I lived in Kansas for a while, and I used to read this T-shirt that says, Dorothy wants to go home and find the dog with her and get on home. The lion wanted courage. We all want that, don't we? The Tin Man, what did he want? He wanted a heart. Remember? He wanted a heart. And the Scarecrow? The Scarecrow wanted a brain. What am I really talking about here? Well, Dorothy and little old Toto, little tiny thing, little tiny dog, they went to see the wizard. And what happened when they went to see the wizard? There was this burly voice that they heard behind them, and the burly voice scared them away, and they left. And they continued on down the yellow road, the yellow brick road. And for a long time, they couldn't find themselves, but they ended up coming back. And the burly, hard, ugly voice that was behind the screen, something like administration? I'm sorry. The burly voice that they heard there, the little Toto pulled the curtain and found out it was fake. He wasn't who he said he was. He's not who he thought he was. But it took a little tiny dog in one moment to say, I need some more. I want you to stand with me on that. Because in that moment, they all figured out it's not what we think it is. It's how we're perceiving it, because we're not pulling the curtain back. Because we're not giving space and room to figure out that there's more to this story than what we see it is up front. And we've got to stay the course. So when you are tired, and when you are feeling like you have no more to give, and you don't want to get up tomorrow to do this work anymore, think about Toto. because Toto was that little, and that's what we need in order for all of us to go home and find our heart. Thank you so much. I'd like to take a few questions. I mean, I spent 3 years on this research. I could go as deep as you'd like me to go. Absolutely, please, go ahead. Thank you.
I can project, but I'll use the mic. Okay. Have you found any correlation between banned books and the GDP for states? You know, I'm just thinking of other ways we can use information to confirm that literacy helps. It probably helps your state's GDP. There's employment data, I would imagine, connected to literacy levels in a county or state.
Yeah, there's data that will show you that literacy matters, but I think the big thing is education. So go broader than literacy. What has education done for us? I didn't share this, but I'll share it now. My father didn't graduate high school. He only had an 8th grade education, but he was a hardworking man, and he taught me the power of getting my own education. And I'm the first in my family to get a doctorate. So my point is that think about beyond the small picture. What does education do for us? How does reading help us? How does groups like this make a difference to help others understand more of who they are? I go to Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah every year. In fact, I just got my invitation again this year. I am not Jewish, but I stand with the Jewish community, and I stand proudly. So those are the kinds of things that can educate. It's not just about reading. It's about how do you do that. Have you been to a school board meeting? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but have you been to a school board meeting? Do you know the books that they're using in the classroom? Can you implement those? Can you run? Thank you for the question. Anyone else? Yes, please.
Are you worried about AI?
I use it. Am I worried? No, I'm not worried, but I'm concerned. I think that's a fair term to use. I think people are using it and throwing it out there and they don't know. So there are ways that we can use AI to help us, but I think that there are ways that it will hurt us. I think we've got to just stay diligent about what's happening in our communities. So I know that in Leesburg, Virginia, there's some big discussion now about whether or not we've got too many data centers. Okay. I think we need to be aware of that. I happen to like our governor. Okay. She's following it. I'm following her. What can I do? And it's like anything else. Were people afraid of women getting the right to vote? Do you know what I'm saying? I know, I'm laughing. But we have to stay diligent with, right, but we have to stay diligent with how we can make it work for everyone to benefit. Oh, I know him.
Thank you. Pam and I both happened to listen to the interview with Eddie Glaude. I didn't hear all of it. Maybe Pam did. But he is the professor of African Studies, and I don't know the exact title, at Princeton. And he has a new book out, which sounds wonderful, about how America celebrated and how the status of America during each centennial and bicentennial and so on throughout the years. And at the very end, he quoted a student, and I'm only paraphrasing, but essentially she said something to the effect that we didn't need to, it wasn't so much hope that we needed, but it was to witness the truth. And he was choked up at that. That one of his students came up with that.
I love Dr. Glaude. I mean, well, actually, Professor Glaude. His wife actually teaches at the college where I graduated undergrad. And I'm from Jersey, so I actually spoke with him when I was doing my research because Princeton held the whole that exhibit for for Toni Morrison. So I met with him at that time when I was doing the research. I think every voice is good based on where they're coming from, if it's moving something forward. When I think about hope, that's what brought us here as we think about President Obama. I don't want to delete hope. I want to add from that more. So that student is probably younger, but she may not have been part of the hope movement that led us here. You know, my parents were not about hope. They were about right to vote. Did you see, you know what I'm saying? So each generation is going to add to it, and I'd like to see us build on those and not just take one and say, this is it. Does that make sense?
It does, but so much of it is being destroyed at this point.
Yes. It is being destroyed, but I think we're doing things like this. We're gathering together today. And there are groups around the country that are doing this. Like I said, I spoke at the National Association of Social Workers conference on empathy and freedom and censorship. Social workers are all about justice. And I spoke there along, like I said, there were 4,000 people there. The American Library Association, they're continuing to do work. So we just have to keep going.
Well, that also reminds me of one of Dr. Glaude's comments was that he really believed in the phrase, we the people.
I agree. I agree. I agree. I asked you if you would to write a book that you read, if you'd put it on there, and if you'd like me to be in touch with you and be part of the podcast. I'm not saying I'm closing, I just want to make sure I collect those. I'd love to collect those and invite you to be part of my podcast and invite you to join a newsletter that we're going to put out to talk about banned books. And every month we're going to focus on a different banned book. And so I think you see, and I'm not comparing myself to, not really, but kind of, Oprah's book list. I'm doing a banned book list because I think that we need to talk about these books and have these authors on. And you're going to be, it's hurtful, it's hateful, it's wrong. Are there any other questions?
This isn't a question, but it's a comment about your observation about the importance of school boards.
Yes.
That we're going to have a coffee break, but after the coffee break, there's going to be a short talk about our local school board and what's happening with challenges.
Fantastic, fantastic. I am working on a book to talk about some of the books that are banned. I was just telling my friend Gail is here. Thank you for being here, Gail. Gail has a group that I'm involved in. I didn't even know she was coming. She has a group of women that write, and they come. And I've kind of been MIA because I said I need 6 months to do nothing. Getting the doctorate just about killed me. But I'm through, like, ready to get back out in the community. But I say that to say I don't have the book out that I've done on banned books, but I've got a little book called Kitchen Talk. And Kitchen Talk is a choreo poem that I wrote. And I want you to think about it this way. This book is to get conversations going. Everything's done in the kitchen. Everything's talked about in the kitchen. And I wrote the poem mostly for women and a few great men, but for women to gather and talk about it. This conversation is about kitchen talk. Is there one last question before I close? Yes.
Just Jean's reference to the program from this morning, but I would recommend Terry Gross. I mean, sort of pursuant of they came for, and I didn't respond, and then they came for. Terry Gross, I believe it was Wednesday, interviewed someone about the movement, you know, white nationalism, but also the masculinism, I can't remember, I think. So it was really shocking to me. I mean, I've heard of it, I've heard some references to this program, but it just seemed deeper, more pervasive than I would have understood, and completely shocking. So if nothing else moved you, they came for our vote, women. It's...
I'm just asking her a question. Can you say just a little bit more about this movement?
I had heard very little except some reference to Pete Hegseth's denomination and what it has, what it represents, what it teaches. And I don't know how to go too far beyond that, Gail, honestly. Just to say, the family should be one unit. The man is the head of the household. The man is the only one who votes. He represents it. What about adult children living in the house? No, still one household, one vote. It just went so far beyond the information that I had heard previously about Hegseth's, short comments on Hegseth's weird, I thought, denomination. And then I'd also just ask you, you're basically looking at fiction, though, right?
No.
Okay.
No, I have not.
Yeah, okay. And then the books you named at the beginning, it made me
Those
think
were-
of,
well,
memoir.
When you think
Okay,
about
and
Anne Frank, that's not fiction.
That's true. That
Yeah,
just
yeah.
clicked for
And
me,
what
sorry.
I did was I wanted to make sure I carried several things in my research, so I used those books. So Toni Morrison was an African-American woman, Angelou, African-American woman, Judy Blume, white female, who wrote primarily to young people, Anne Frank, who was a Jewish girl who wrote about history. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then I used a gay black male. So I wanted to kind of cover
True
many
enough.
different-
I'm sorry, yeah. I wrote down books that are nonfiction, and that's why I thought maybe that isn't really
Yeah,
the realm.
no,
but-
and I picked,
Thank
I
you.
had not picked Judy Blume first, but when I started doing the research, one of my professors said, add Judy Blume because she does a lot for young women, and she works specifically to young girls, and that's what you want to do. You want to make sure you're getting young people involved. Jason Reynolds is another person I looked at bringing into the research, and Thomas that wrote The Hate You Give. I looked at that book. I looked at that
I kept
book.
thinking about
but you
that
couldn't
when you
do
said-
everything, you know, and I had to really delve into their backgrounds and that research.
The Hate You Give
Yes.
was made into a movie, and when I
Yes.
saw the credits and it said YA, based on a YA, that kind of blew my mind that the movie was, but I thought it was, in a certain season, I thought it was the best movie I'd seen in ages. So, yeah, I
There were so
that
many
title.
books, but I wanted to use traditional.
Of
and,
course.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry? Yes. So. Have I taken too much time? Oh, okay, all right.
Well, Dr. Scott, we do want to thank you very much for
Thank you.
your presentation and
you
for,
so much.
yes, please,
Thank you so much.
for inspiring us not to give up the fight, for inspiring us to read banned books, and we really appreciate the gifts that you've given us. We're going to take a break for coffee and some munchies, and which is in the social hall through the doors and to the left. And a reminder that Kitchen Talk, which is the book that Dr. Scott was just talking about, she will be doing a book signing at the end of our program this morning. So thank you very much.